Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Our Children, Our Schools webinar, Protecting Public Education in New Jersey, what federal actions mean for our children and our schools. We are so glad to be joined by a dynamic panel of champions for education who have been working overtime in 2025 in order to protect the rights, protections, services, and really the things that we as a state and as a country are responsible for delivering to our children in our schools and our families and our communities. We are excited to welcome you to the Our Children, Our Schools webinar. OCOS is a statewide coalition of parents, educators, advocates, and community leaders committed to protecting and strengthening public education in New Jersey. We bring together diverse groups to ensure equity, access, and justice for every child. Tonight's webinar is to continue that mission, and now more than ever, our work together, united, is important. However, we must be informed in order to take action. And so we put together this webinar just to do that. Thank you to our task force for their leadership in deciding that this was a conversation that we needed to have. Excited to introduce you to our panelists. We have Robert Kim, Executive Director of the Education Law Center. Bob is a nationally recognized expert in education law and policy with a career dedicated to advancing civil rights and equity in public education. He has served in leadership roles at the U.S. Department of Education and authored key works on federal policy that has shaped schools. At the Ed Law Center, Robert focuses on ensuring that students most impacted by inequities are at the center of reform efforts. Thank you, Robert Kim, for being with us this evening. We look forward to hearing from you. We know you have been working overtime for our children, so we thank you. Tyneisha Gibbs is a Director of Policy and Youth Advocacy for the New Jersey School Age Care Coalition. She Gibbs is a leader in youth development and after-school advocacy, serving as the director in this coalition with an extensive experience in program design and community partnerships. She has worked hard to expand quality out-of-school time opportunities across the state. Her voice is essential in shaping policies that support working families and ensure young people have safe, enriching spaces to learn and grow. And her voice has been critical in protecting after school in our state. So thank you, Tyneisha Gibbs, for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you. And Peter Rosario, the president and CEO of La Casa de Don Pedro, one of Newark's largest and most trusted community-based organizations. He brings decades of experience in nonprofit leadership with a focus on family engagement, immigrant services, and neighborhood empowerment. Peter's work reflects a deep commitment to building stronger communities by centering the voices and needs of families. And Peter, we know that from the very beginning of our new president's tenure, you have been working overtime as well to protect the rights of immigrant children and families in our city, and we thank you for your work. All right, so again, before we get started, I do want to remind you that we are utilizing the chat and the question and answer box. Please feel free to send your questions and your comments. We will make sure that we will raise as many of them as possible, and any that cannot be answered, we will get an answer to you after our webinar has ended, along with other resources that could be helpful. All right, so we are going to start with Bob Kim to talk to us about what is happening at the federal level as it relates to policies and funding and all the things that he has been working to stop from impacting us in New Jersey. So give me 1 second while I switch over to your slides, and we'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you so much, Kaleena, and thank you, OCOS, and everybody joining us this evening. It's a sign that you truly care about what's going on in the country right now around public education and are dedicated to helping our students and our school communities really persevere and do the best they can in these pretty difficult times. So thank you all for being here. And I'm really happy to be here also with my co-panelists. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on inside the DC Beltway around education, and then sort of circle back to how these developments are maybe and are impacting New Jersey, and then maybe offer a few reflections on what we ought to be doing in these troubling times. So wanted to get right into it. Next slide, please. As you know, Education Law Center, we have been around in New Jersey for more than 50 years. We pursue and protect and advance public education in New Jersey and throughout the United States. And we do that through litigation, research, policy, advocacy, and communications. And we really have focused traditionally on school finance, more recently on keeping vouchers out of states, including, by the way, New Jersey. And advancing student civil rights in New Jersey and around the country. Next slide. So just as a review, and I will say that things are happening so fast and furious in DC that even those of us who present on this can sometimes get behind really quickly, like even within a span of a couple of weeks. I did a presentation a couple weeks ago where I was out of date by the end of the presentation because something had happened during the presentation. So that's how quickly things are happening right now around DC. But just as a review, let's go back to January 19, 2025. What was the role, the federal role in education as we understood it? And as many of you do know, that the traditional role of federal education in this country was and has been to provide some supplementary education funding for states and districts for K-12 schools and also higher ed, by the way, to support high need student populations. This includes students with disabilities, English learners. This includes students that may be disadvantaged by other backgrounds, immigrant students, migrant students, recently arrived students, you name it. But that's been the federal role, department by department, within the US Department of Education, where I did work throughout the majority of the Obama administration. The role of the federal government has been to support high need student populations, to help low-income students go to college, to collect and gather research and data around how students are doing across the United States, and to advance research on how to improve student outcomes in both in school and in their lives, to advance education policy, and most critically, and I hope we get to spend some time on this, is to protect students' civil rights. We had, where I used to work, 600 civil rights attorneys working around the clock to investigate possible violations of students' civil rights in hundreds and thousands of school districts around the country. Next slide. And so we were warned about what was happening right now. We were warned about this even before the administration started through the so-called Project 2025 blueprint published by the Republican Party. And the goals were, as you can see here, to eliminate the Federal Department of Education, to expand vouchers throughout the country, roll back civil rights protections, eliminate and reduce and block grant critical funding streams that go to states and districts, scale back other supportive things such as school nutrition, and also continuing a theme from Trump 1.0 is to enact policies that would really censor schools and students from engaging in curricular topics that might involve race or gender or LGBTQ issues or any issues that might be called, in the words of this administration, divisive. So they essentially became censorship policies. These were all part of Project 2025. And you all know, having lived through the administration for almost 10 months so far, that the administration is pretty much following Project 2025 item by item to the T pretty accurately. So we were warned about this, and they're now executing this blueprint as we speak. Next slide. And so one of the first things that the Trump administration did was to issue a spate of executive orders from the White House. These executive orders don't have the force of law, but they do enable the agencies, the cabinet agencies, to pursue policies to execute or implement these executive orders. And I won't go through all of these, but just to give you to name a few, these very euphemistically titled executive orders dealt with everything from trying to limit, again, like sort of censor what is being taught or discussed in schools, to address and expand the elimination of affirmative action at the higher ed level, to expand that to those limitations to K-12 schools, to target transgender students and including transgender student participation in athletics, to really go after immigrant students and immigrants in general in a very specific and targeted manner. And I know that Peter and others will probably want to talk about that at length. Other executive orders really wanted to expand school choice and vouchers throughout the country, to return so-called return power to parents and to states, which is also sort of a code word for getting rid of the federal government and its role in education, and so forth. So these are the executive orders among dozens of others that have been issued just in the first few months of the administration. And there have been policy and legal developments around many of these executive orders. Next slide. And so one of the major things that is happening, as you all know, is the administration issued an executive order on March 20 to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. That includes eliminating or radically reducing many of those core functions that I mentioned in the previous slide just a few minutes ago. What that's resulted in is a shrinking of more than half of the federal workforce that was working to execute those core functions of the federal government around education. There was a termination also of many federal contracts, including any training grants for educators that the government perceived as being promoting DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has become a dirty word somehow. So lots of federal contracts around DEI under the guise of, or the rationale of promoting DEI have been terminated. Teacher professional development grants have been terminated, Title II grants, and many research contracts have been terminated as well. There was also a very, among other anti-DEI actions that have taken place, a Dear Colleague letter issued in February, which really purported to regulate almost every aspect of campus life, both in higher ed and in K-12 schools, prohibiting discussion or promulgation of anything that could contribute to equity or social justice, or provide special programs or events that could help our minority populations, our at-risk populations on campuses throughout the country. So that really was a significant, I would argue, very retrograde policy that the administration rolled out just a few weeks after the administration had officially started. And then next slide. And so what this has meant for New Jersey is that now, because of all of these federal cuts, there's a lot more pressure on New Jersey and states around the country to anticipate and address possibly a reduction of federal aid for K-12 schools. And we note here that New Jersey is a little lucky because we don't rely as much on federal support for public education as do most other states. but it is still a significant amount of money, to the tune of $1.2 billion. And some districts actually rely on far more than the New Jersey average in terms of reliance on federal funding. So with the elimination or reduction of these funds, that's going to put a lot more pressure on New Jersey to make up the difference or to address these shortfalls in one way or another. We also will be missing our federal coordination of research and data collection efforts on education best practices and how students are doing in New Jersey educationally. A lot of that is led by and coordinated by the federal government. Continuing threats to DEI-related programs and activities in New Jersey. And certainly there's going to be an increased responsibility of New Jersey to protect and enforce student civil rights, because that whole unit where I used to work in DC has been effectively gutted, although there are some recent developments where some of the employees are being forced to, through litigation, to come back. But the jury's out on whether OCR will actually be able to restore some of its functions that have been critically decimated over the past 6 months. So a lot of pressure for New Jersey and other states to address these federal developments. Next slide. And some additional concerns we're tracking, and I hope others will talk about this too, the elimination of the so-called sensitive locations policy, which prohibited ICE from engaging in immigration enforcement actions around locations like public schools and also community centers, churches, courthouses, things like that. That protection has been lifted or removed by the Trump administration. We are now dealing with the increased ICE presence and the fear of ICE presence around schools. We're also following New Jersey's unique requirement that everyone has to fill out a FAFSA form to graduate from high school. The FAFSA form does require a lot of sensitive student information that might be particularly sensitive to our immigrant student population. So we are tracking that. As many of you know, there was, through the reconciliation bill that was passed by Congress a few months ago, among other things, a new federal tax voucher program that was enacted. And so New Jersey, we don't have vouchers, as you know, but it will be up to the new governor, whoever that is, to opt in or opt out of a federal voucher program that could really hurt public schools in New Jersey. And then also through that same federal bill, reconciliation bill that was passed a few months ago, early in the summer, there were deep Medicaid cuts enacted and cuts to SNAP benefits. These are going to affect schools, both in terms of school nutrition, but also in terms of many services, including mental health services that are actually paid for through Medicaid. So even the cuts through that reconciliation bill will escalate and have harms for New Jersey schools moving forward. Next slide. And so ELC has been up to a lot. We have been no summer slowdown for us. We've been doing so many things. I won't go through all of the things, but among other things, we are suing the Trump administration to oppose the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. That case is still pending in federal district court. We have testified in front of Congress to try to slow down and encourage the mostly Republican House of Representatives that education federally is so important to continue and maintain. We have many advocacy materials in place now, and you can visit our websites to gain access to these tools, including a new advocacy tool to measure how proposed federal cuts would impact New Jersey schools by district, even by congressional district. And so I think it'd be very useful for advocacy purposes to use that tool. And then I won't mention all the other things here, but we've really been engaged in a lot of efforts, both publicly and in the courts, to ensure that the rights of students are maintained. And then finally, just to wrap up here, because I know time is precious. Next slide.
Sorry, got a little bit of a lag here, Bob.
No problem, no
There
problem.
we go. Thank you.
So there have been many dozens of lawsuits filed. Some of them are going well, some of them are not going well. I'm happy to follow up with folks afterwards if you're interested in the status of a particular effort around resisting the Trump administration in one way or another. And the cases are continuing, sadly, and will continue to be engaged in various court fights as one of the few branches of governments that at least theoretically remain available to slow down what's happening right now. And then the next slide. The things that I will leave you with are just some thoughts about what we all can do. Obviously, OCOS, this is a tremendous community. You know how to engage and how to organize, but we do need to continue to go to our school board meetings and our district leadership and urge them to maintain crucial programs and student supports. We want to meet with our legislator and the governor's offices and the new governor candidates to talk about critical state funding needs moving forward, as well as our federal elected representatives, including on the pending upcoming school year federal budget, which we didn't get into, but there are significant cuts contemplated in the upcoming federal budget, including around Title I, which is a primary vehicle for funding school districts with high percentages of low-income students. So we need to band together, we need to keep in touch, and we need to support organizations, including many of yours and ELC. We love a little support as well, to continue these fights. So with that, I will turn it back over to Kaleena.
Thank you so much, Bob. And I think your message is important. We're going to have to band together. And if we leave you with something is we have organizations like ELC that are working tremendously on the ground to make sure that they are fighting back against a lot of these executive orders and decisions that are being made. And when they call for us, we must come. We must show up and we must let this country know that we are paying attention. All right, so we're going to bring up Tyneisha Gibbs to talk to us more about what is happening in the world of after school. So Tyneisha, we welcome you up. Bob is not going anywhere, folks. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to transition to that after we hear from everyone. So Tyneisha, are you there?
Yes, I am, but it says my video is disabled by the host.
Okay, all right. We're going to enable your video and I'm going to work on your PowerPoint while we do that. All right.
Thank you so much. And thank you to my colleague, Bob, who shared such great insights. And so I'm going to bring first greetings from our state, from New Jersey, from New Jersey's After School and Out of School Time Professional Network. My name is Tyneisha Gibbs, and I am super excited to be here with you all today. I am the Director of Policy and Youth Advocacy here at NJSACC. Next slide.
I'm coming. It's just a little bit of a
That's
lag.
okay. We keep it rocking and rolling.
There we go. Okay.
Just a little bit of background about NJSACC and who we are. Again, we are the statewide network, so that means that they are one of us in every state. We are funded by the New Jersey Department of Education, as well as the New Jersey Department of Family Development through the Department of Human Services, as well as the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. We're also the New Jersey affiliate for the National After School Association. And so there are four key components of what we do in New Jersey and our mission. We really envision every youth and family in New Jersey having access to high quality and sustainable out of school time programs. And we do that through quality, equity, advocacy, and professional development. Next slide. All right, so tonight I'm going to touch on our work in the policy and advocacy space, specifically highlighting a couple of things that we do, as well as what are some things that are at risk and at stake, not only in New Jersey, but I am going to highlight or spotlight, if you will, one of our beloved cities. And so here at NJSACC, you can go back, thank you. Here at NJSACC, nope, back that one slide. Thank you. Here at NJSACC, perfect. Here at NJSACC, we focus in on our policy and advocacy, specifically through our national advocacy work with the Afterschool Alliance. We also have a statewide youth advocacy work group, as well as a statewide youth advisory board. And there are 5 in the state civic engagement theme 21st century programs, and we host annually our youth advocacy day. On the screen, you'll see a picture from one of our youth advocacy days, as well as a flyer. And we invite you to partner with us on these events. Next slide. So let's talk about what's going on in New Jersey, in our state. So for every child that participates in an after-school program, 3 more would participate and are missing out. Now, this is despite strong public support for after school. In fact, 9 in 10 voters, and this is across the aisle, say that they support public funding being put towards and allocated towards out-of-school time programming. And so out-of-school time are really all of those wraparound services that support K-12 education. So when we think about our youth and where they spend their most time, most of the time that they spend is outside of the home. So they go to school, the parents have to, drop them off earlier than normal. They might be having breakfast at school. Then they go to their classrooms. After they go to their classrooms and they get their education, mom is still at work. I don't know about you all, but I don't get off of work at 3 o'clock. And neither do teachers. And so even teachers' children oftentimes have to be put into an after-school program. And so those programs and supports are integral, not only for working families and for our economy, but also for our children's learning. So we want to make sure that we're championing that. So what are New Jersey after-school programs really doing after school? Is it babysitting or is it something deeper? And I am here to tell you that there are scientific benefits from childhood to adulthood for after-school students. And we know this because we have looked at and observed the outcomes for those learners who participate in after-school programs as opposed to those who do not participate in after-school programs. And we have seen specifically that there is a reduction in chronic absenteeism. We have seen higher grades, we've seen higher social skills, we've seen an increase in positive relationships with their peers and their staff. This goes on for them to then have higher GPAs, higher test scores, higher graduation rates. And higher graduation rates, as you know, leads to better decision-making, higher earnings, right? And going off on to college or trade school. Next slide. And so we wanted to look at how our after-school programs really operating post-pandemic, because we saw during the pandemic, after-school programs ended up opening their doors and providing more supports than they ever had to do in the past. And my colleague on the call, he really stepped up, Peter Rosario down at Casa de Pedro. Their program stepped up so much to be able to provide not only meals and spots and laptops and all these other different supports for families. And programs were open when schools were closed. And so we surveyed programs in New Jersey, and these are just some of the things that they said. So 98% said that they are supporting and providing our students with academic enrichment. They're doing that through homework or academic help. They're doing that through STEM learning opportunities, and they're doing that through reading or writing time, of which we know that right now we are in a literacy crisis in our state, right? Specifically in certain enclaves of our state. And so we need to be more intentional about additional reading and writing time that we are giving to our students. And so the after school time summer program space is a perfect time for that. We also noticed that nutrition, during the summertime, students were receiving meals that they were able to take home with their siblings and to their families. There are some programs that even go above and beyond and provide boxes of vegetables and meal kits that you can take home to your families. And not only does that provide nutrition, but it also provides an opportunity for them to bond together by making a meal with one another. And lastly, we are supporting well-being. And, this month we are focused on youth mental health, right? It's also Youth Suicide Awareness Month. And so we know here in New Jersey that we do have an issue with youth mental health. And so after school, out of school time programs also provide that opportunity for youth to talk with their peers and staff about their feelings and emotions. Youth vote with their feet. They come to programs because of those relationships that they have with those caring adults. Next slide. So let's look at our state. So this is last year. This is last year's data for 21st century. Now, in New Jersey, we do not currently have a state funding stream that will specifically support after school and summer programming. In 2010, that was $15 million that was allocated in our state budget, and that was zeroed out under that administration. We have not yet been able to secure another funding stream that would support all after school and out of school time programs. And so that means that we are heavily reliant on federal supports for after school. So last year in New Jersey, we served 13,699 students. We did receive $31 million in federal supports, and that was funneled through our state education agency. And that was through 67 grantees that were focused on career exploration, STEM, STEAM, civic engagement, as well as visual and performing arts. Next slide. And I heard my colleague Bob say, what's at stake? What's at stake in New Jersey? And so there are a couple of things that are at stake in New Jersey that I just want to highlight. And then I'm going to do this spotlight on Newark, because I know Bob was talking about specific the budget for FY26 and what's at stake in that budget. And so right now, what we are looking at, there is a $30 million windfall in CCAP. For those of you who receive child care subsidy, you know that the window for child care subsidy applications were closed on August 1st. So that meant that new families could not apply to be able to tap into those resources and that funds for them to be able to receive a child care subsidy, which would cover after school, summer, and any other early childhood costs. Not only is there that $30 million windfall in the CCAP budget, but we are also looking at a reduction of after school as well as IDEA funds in the current FY26 spending. So specifically for Department of Education funds, there is it's a 12% reduction that we're looking at in that budget, actually 15% reduction that we're looking at in that budget, and that equates to $12 billion that will be removed if this were to pass through. And what they are trying to do is they are trying to roll up all of some of the grant funds together into a block grant. So that means that after school could essentially go away. That also means that with that reduction, you might also see IDEA funds go away. And if that were to happen, a lot of things would be at stake. Not only would there be a reduction in services per school district, but there will also be a reduction or a complete elimination of after-school funding, or a reduction and complete elimination of IDEA funds as well. And this chart, I see someone say that the chart is too small. I can drop a link for you all to be able to access it yourself. But I'm just going to drop a little bit of tidbit really quick. So under the current president's proposal for the Department of Education, specifically in Newark, the current amount that is allocated is $79 million. And so with the new amount that is being proposed, that is going to be reduced by $13 million. Okay, so that means that there would be a reduction in Newark of $335 per student. And so, you know, all of our school districts are being stretched, which means that if there's a reduction in each district's budget that is allocated from the federal government, that means that there's going to also be a reduction again on the state level. And as we saw in this recent budget cycle, a lot of districts did not fare well in those in that reduction. Next slide. So when I'm looking specifically at 21st century, and again, I'm spotlighting Newark because my colleague on the call is hailing from Newark, and he is one of our 21st century grantees, La Casa de Pedro. So I just want to lift this up. So last year, Newark programs served 1,558 youth. Can we go back? Thank you. And so there was 3.7 million that was specifically in Newark that was funded entirely from the federal government. And that was through our 21st Century Community Learning Center grant funds. And so last year, there were 8 21st century programs. Due to funding cuts this year, Afterschool All-Stars, which was a previously funded program, is no longer funded. So what does that mean? I know we have Patterson Education Foundation on this call as well. Patterson Education Foundation is also a grantee that wasn't funded. So our only existing ecosystem of free after school and summer programming through our state, we are seeing a reduction already in those programs because the amount of money that was originally allocated for this went from 7 million to 11 million and then reduced this year to 4 million for competitive grant dollars. So that means there wasn't even enough money to go around for refunding those other organizations. And why is this important? This is important because, like I said, we do not currently in New Jersey have a state set aside for after school and summer program. So what can you do? You, next slide, can help this by getting involved. You can reach out to your federal representatives as well as your state legislators. You can attend a Lights On After School event in your town or in your area. And also you can scan this QR code, which will take you directly to a digital call to action tool that will email your legislators right there on the spot. And I will be glad to take any of your questions on how else you can get involved. But thank you so much, Kaleena, for inviting us to be on this call.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gibbs. So I'm going to ask Bob to come back, and Peter and Tyneisha, I'm going to ask you to stay because I think we're getting to the part that Peter is going to share with us is what does this mean for people on the ground? So I know, this can sound very far away. dollars are being cut, executive orders, all of the litigation, all of these things can sound really complicated, but what it has meant is actually very detrimental to progress made in our state. What it has meant is that there are programs that are being eliminated that were not only created to help improve the quality of education and service provided to young people, but also career pathways, such as the Montclair Urban Teacher Education, the Urban Teacher Residency Program is now defunded. This means that there's no place for families who have issues related to civil rights that they need to take to the federal level for them to be able to go. Families with children with disabilities, don't have that level of protection. Immigrant students and their families are at risk of being deported or assaulted by ICE. These are changes that are reshaping what it means for us to be a New Jerseyan, and also what it means to be a part of this country. So, Peter, what has this meant for families on the ground, and what has La Casa been doing? And then as we hear from Peter, we're going to welcome questions from the audience. So thank you, Peter.
No pressure, Kaleena. Thank you for, teeing
Setting
me
the
up.
real for you.
Right, setting the real. So I think first of all, we got to acknowledge I'm missing my granddaughter's soccer practice. Everybody on this call is missing self-care.
Yeah,
Right.
for
So
sure.
I will frame this as a boots on the ground, and I saw one of my foot soldiers on the ground there, really, Tia Moss, and I have 250 of them. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly reminding them, right? I have two catchphrases, right? The love that's not rooted in injustice is colonizing with the hug, right? And fighting the battle without taking care of your home is colonizing yourself.
All
So
right.
I'll put that framing there for us to make sure we understand that. And specifically, I get to reflect here, right? 22 years ago, when I first decided to cross the river and come over here, I was researching for a job. I probably read every single article that the Education Law Center had written from about 1995 to 2003 to date myself on that. And then in 2010, when Tyneisha was talking about the Christie administration cutting NJ after 3, right? Christie, right? Tyneisha was a new practitioner. I was the seasoned veteran. I was doing the presentations on all the slides and all of that things, right? So this comes full circle, right? That this is a generational struggle that we all need to do. And to the point, right? What was it, January 22nd, Robert? We're sitting there hearing about a raid happening in East Newark, and I'm sitting there and I'm doing a press conference, literally explaining to the nation at that point. I was sitting there really figuring out. I got a text from one of my African American staff, right, who said, "Hey, I'm here by myself. Please make sure you call my sister if ICE shows up at the door." I said, "No, close that center up, get to another center. Let's make sure we keep you safe." Because in Newark, we understand that if you come after one of us, you're coming after all 300,000 of us, right? We had to wrestle with, so if ICE shows up at our door and they're bringing assault rifles, that would be an active shooter drill. If we can get them to holster their weapons, do we treat that as a shelter-in-place drill? Right? These are the real issues that we're facing on the ground, dealing with. And I was just on a panel with and everybody said it. I have probably talked to Senator Booker, Senator Kim, Congressman Bob Menendez, Congresswoman Monica MacGyver, our mayor, constantly about these things. And just reiterating that at this point, we almost have what's similar to an underground railroad to keep our children safe. Parents are deciding every day, hey, let me find out, is it safe for my kid to go to school today? Is it safe for me to go to work? Or should I just keep everybody home today? Those are the real issues they're facing. And I think the last 2 points I would make is we haven't touched on adult education, similar 15 million, $16 million that impacts. They're called Title II funds. They're the same funds that are wrapped up in the after school funding. I mean, those are the funds that get people to work, right? Workforce development dollars, ESL, GED, helping. And we had the two congressional members listening to the families saying, hey, listen, you see these textbooks that I'm using to learn English? I teach everybody in my family English with these textbooks. So these funds are so critically important and gets people into the workforce. And the last thing I think we all need to do is really better understand. And I see some of the emails, some of the comments in the chat. This is your local school board. This is the state government, and these are the feds. All of us need to demand that y'all talk to each other better, right? And have transparency in government in terms of where are the dollars going and where are they coming from. And I think I'll leave it at that because it sounds like we have a few questions in the chat, and I just want to thank everybody for being here.
Thank you, Peter. And yes, you talked about adult education. There was a question that came through on the registration form about early childhood education. So, Peter, I know that La Casa has early childhood education programming, and of course, Bob and Tyneisha, if you have anything to add, but what has been the impact when it comes to early childhood education so far?
Families are staying home. It's a scary time. I have centers that were full last year that may have 30-40% enrollment. I've operated 10 childcare centers. I'm down to 7. I may be down to 5 at the end of the day when this is all done. It's scary to me to say, this is a bipartisan issue, but it's not at this point. We are literally saying to families and to babies, stay home. Don't receive the services that you need. Right. And Head Start was the original program. There was a war on poverty. And now with the Abbott versus Burke, back to the Ed Law Center, right? If you could think about the biggest victory we had, aside from Brown versus the Board of Education, all of that is going backwards right now. And it's a scary time for our youngest learners.
Thank you, Peter.
I will add that, and thanks for the reference to Abbott. We secured the right to pre-K as part of the right to a quality education in New Jersey. That is not a secured right for most states, in most states. So we're a little unique, a little bit ahead in that regard, that we do have a right to universal pre-K in many of our districts, and that right has been expanded to more districts beyond the Abbott districts in recent years. We did a report, which we can put in the chat, around low participation rates in pre-K programs in New Jersey, particularly following the pandemic. And we haven't seen, and what we call for is for the state to really address the need for more support and outreach and engagement to ensure that early childhood and pre-K programs in New Jersey remain well-funded and that have adequate participation moving forward. And we are seeing threatened cuts to Head Start. With the federal government, we dodged a little bit of a bullet with really draconian Head Start cuts over the summer. But we've got to monitor what's going to happen with HHS funding, which controls the Head Start funding, what's going to happen this year as this budget rolls out, this budget for next year federally gets determined. And there's so many complications moving forward. You all know there's a threatened government shutdown coming up in Congress. And so that will affect certain programs as well. And so we've got to watch for all of these things. It's really truly a weird time now with education federally, with a threatened shutdown of the whole department and then a government shutdown on top of that. So, it's almost like staff furloughs on top of a lot of rifts, and furloughing the rest of the people. So it's a very precarious time now in terms of continuation of a lot of critical funding streams, even through this current school year. But we should take heart that even with a government shutdown, some of these major funding programs are forward funded through this year. So we may still be able to have some continuity of funding, even if there is a government shutdown. But we can't guarantee that all programs and all implementation will be able to carry through because of how unusual it is right now with a decimated federal staff and then a possibility of an extended shutdown.
Thank you, Bob. And we're joined by Devance Moda, who is our student, Our Children, Our Schools member. He's helping out with the questions in the chat. So thank you, Devance, for being here. And so, Bob, we did get a question from Kaylee Klapsick. She wanted to know the inverse of your statistic about New Jersey being the second least dependent state on federal funding. She wants to know, what are the most dependent states on federal funding?
I'm so disappointed because if I were more organized, I would have the chart in front of me. I've been carrying it around for 4 months, and then just when I need it, it's not right in front of me. But when I testified in Congress to a largely Republican panel on appropriations, it was like me here. To my right was the architect of Project 2025. To their right was a conservative parent organization representative. To my left was the head of the National Charter School Association. They all either agreed that the federal government should get out of education, or in the case of the Charter Association, did not want to answer that question of whether there should be a complete elimination of the federal department. But in that hearing, I made sure to point out that the top 17, 18 states that most rely on federal funding for K-12 education are the so-called red states. They all supported President Trump in the last election. Some of them are deeply, not even purple, they're deeply red states. And the sad thing is that those states that most rely on federal funding are the ones that provide the least funding on their own without federal funding. And we have a Making the Grade report, which we're going to have a new report analyzing all 50 states and how they do on school funding. We're going to release that in a couple of months. But even from the prior last year's version of the report, we know that these states that rely upwards of like almost approaching a quarter of their school funding. Can you imagine if a quarter of New Jersey school funding was federal?
Unimaginable.
Quarter in some of these states, okay? And then stripping away the federal funding, they provide 1/3 of the funding per pupil as New Jersey. So already starved. And then on top of that, it's the supporters of this administration that have the most to lose from the actions of this administration. And that is the ongoing irony, or I don't know what the fancy word is for this, the paradox, the irony of like what's happening here in this country is those that really need a strong federal support for education are the ones that are supporting the representatives who most want to tear that all away.
Yeah, and the impact is definitely to be felt. Tyneisha, there is a question for you around civic engagement and young people. So Felicia Moss asks, Tyneisha, civic engagement is so extremely critical at this time. We are teaching our scholars to use their voice to make tremendous impact in their community. Do you have any recommendations for students to be champions and advocates for change on the state, local, and more importantly, federal level to advocate for these much needed services for themselves and their families?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for that question. So I am so energized by the youth because they are truly leading the way and showing us just how unabashed they are in using their voice. And honestly, I feel like it's for us to amplify them. And so over at La Casa, you're already doing an amazing job at getting your students to be engaged. But I would say encourage them to do more PSAs, create videos, get their families involved, interview people to say, why is this important? And I say that because the youth know how to use social media as an activist tool better than anybody. Like if you look at what Generation Alpha and Generation Z have been able to do in order to build up student-led movements via social media, it is to be commended. And we need that kind of momentum for these movements. And it is in that lens that I feel like you'll be able to have the most impact, because it'll be able to have the most reach. And then also any opportunities that the youth can get to get out and speak up, take advantage of them. In New Jersey, they can be absent from school and it won't count against them if they're going down to their state house in order to, testify or to speak with legislators, or going down to DC. So I would say definitely using their voice more.
Mm-hmm. And so, everyone, we're approaching the end of our hour. Please know that this is the start of greater conversations, not the end. Our goal is to keep you all connected. We convene all the time. So there are always webinars, meetings, conversations to be a part of. And in our follow-up for this webinar, we will send them to you. But I do have one final question for our panelists. So in November, we are challenged in New Jersey with electing a new governor. Governor Murphy's tenure is ending, and we are going to have the opportunity to put someone else in leadership over our state. And I know all of you can attest to, especially now, how important it will be to have someone working on our behalf at the state level. So as the folks are on the campaign trail, telling us all about their agenda and the things that they're going to prioritize, what should we be listening for from the candidates that will continue to move us forward? So what should we be waiting to hear from them in terms of making sure that we know that they're committed to protecting public education and the services that our families need? And, I'll let anyone who's ready go first.
Well, I'll just say generally that it's a critical election this fall in New Jersey. The new governor, whoever it is, will make so many decisions around school funding for our schools moving forward. Either the new governor will or will not make permanent some of the fixes that we were able to achieve through the S2 legislation, through this around the school funding formula. The new governor will or will not be committed to preschool, which we need to make sure that preschool becomes more available and cemented throughout New Jersey. The new governor will or will not add to school facilities funding, which we have a $7 billion shortfall for our Abbott districts around school facilities funding, and the legislature has not put forward enough money toward that. The new governor will or will not accept federal vouchers into New Jersey, because the governor has the decision of whether or not to voucherize, allow SGOs to offer money for students to go to private school, and in many cases that would take away from public school enrollment. And the new governor will or will not address student rights and segregation of our schools. We need civil rights to be maintained. And so our immigrant students, our LGBTQ plus students, our English learner students, our immigrant students, we really need these protections. And I think these are all critical decisions for our schools communities for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. Tyneisha or Peter?
Who's off mute?
Go ahead, Tyneisha.
Thank you. So honestly, Bob really covered a lot of it. The only thing that I'll just make sure to say is that our new governor is going to have to show us that they are all in on kids. And that is from cradle to career. So it's going to take an investment in preschool, as well as an investment in school-age childcare. It's going to take an investment in our higher education systems. It's going to take an investment in our, disability supports for our youth that are in schools who need that additional support. And so that person is going to have the wherewithal to be able to reach across the aisle and be able to make things happen for all of New Jersey's youth and the educators that support them in all spheres.
Thank you, Tyneisha. And Peter.
Do not weaponize our babies. Very simple. If you're going to use our children to get yourself votes, we're going to hold your ass accountable.
That's right. All right. Peter, I think that's the perfect way to end this forum as we prepare ourselves to fight back against the attack on our babies, because it really is, right? They deserve everything that they're entitled to in this country, and we got to make sure that they have it. So again, thank you, Tyneisha. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Peter, for giving your time. Peter, please thank your granddaughter for sharing us with you this evening. I will not ask you on a Tuesday to do anything again.
You
I just want to make sure
you
you don't
have
miss
to
that.
thank your prince too.
Okay, yes. Y'all, he has been going off in that other room since I've been on this call. So thank you all. Again, there are many thanks in the chat for this panel and for all that you've provided. We are going to follow up with all of you with all of the links and the webinars and the email addresses and the websites that are relevant to this conversation. We also invite you to join Our Children, Our Schools. We meet on Wednesday, the 3rd, usually Wednesday of each month, 10 a.m. on Zoom. And so if you're interested in becoming a member, email us at info@ourchildrenOurschools.org. You can also read our policy brief, which covers a lot of this that's here. In addition to our need to fix the state board, there are still expired seats before Governor Murphy leaves office. We need to make the state board as powerful as it can be to protect public education. So that's one of our calls to Governor Murphy. Before you go, make the state board right. All right. So have a good evening, everyone. Be safe, be vigilant, and vigilant. Is that a word? I don't know if that's a word, but be safe, be strong, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.